The saddest you are not the father moments on paternity court.
You are not the father. Are not her father.
Oh my God. Are you serious? Really, Mom?
Mr. Benning's recent appearance on the couples court led to the revelation of his wife's infidelity, and this has led him to doubt the paternity of both his children. With their marriage on the rocks, Mr. Benning wants DNA proof to save their love.
Mr. Benning, you recently appeared in couples court and it was confirmed that the defendant cheated on you. This infidelity has caused questions regarding your 2-year-old daughter, Robin, and 6-month-old son, Jermaine Jr.'s paternity. Although you are hopeful that both are your children, you now have doubts. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
However, Ms. Bodine's swindling ended up sabotaging the plaintiff's dream of having a daughter, which was draining him after losing his mother at a young age. He always wished for a daughter.
We are so close. She's goofy, she loves daddy. She's a daddy's baby. We love to play, chase each other around. Goldfish is our snack, we love.
It's our snack. I love how you said that.
I've just always been there. No matter what Robin needed, I'm always there.
So you can imagine how ecstatic he was about becoming a father. And even Mommy did not doubt him being the father. Don't forget, she had this assumption even after cheating on him. But truth has its way coming. Let's watch how the poor daddy found out about the other guy.
It actually happened during labor, Your Honor. I was in the hospital sitting across from Kayla as she was pushing this baby out. And I received a text from a guy telling me to leave the hospital because that's his baby and he needs to be there.
What?
I am in labor, like literally in the hospital. And I received a text telling me that the child that I'm waiting to come isn't mine.
Even though the news was devastating enough to break him down, Mr. Benning was not ready to give up on both ladies halfway. So he went on and signed the birth certificate. Listening to this, the judge asked the mommy why she was so certain that Mr. Benning fathered her children. And she explained herself.
How do you know this other guy is not the biological father?
I stood up, did the woman and the mother thing I had to do, and got the other guy tested.
And you submitted those results to the court?
Yes, I did.
Probability of paternity between you and this other guy is 0%.
Yes.
My, what a plot twist. Surely you didn't see that coming. But the truth is that the defendant had been busy with more than one person. And believe it or not, Ms. Bodine may be claiming he is the father in front of the judge. But every time things got drifty, she shoved "you are not the father" in Mr. Benning's face.
First off, that DNA test doesn't mean anything considering the fact that she's cheated on me with more than one person. There could be other guys out there, that's just one.
That's the plot twist.
Anytime that something is wrong, I'm also reminded, oh, you're not her father. As soon as we start to argue, you're not her father, I'm
You
the father.
say stuff to hurt my feelings, why can't
Have I
do
ever
it
told
to
you that you're not the parent of your kid?
All this surely ripped more than one can handle. But Mommy had no remorse for any of her actions. She was just in for tit for tat, ignoring how all of this was distorting her family. See, when things get this vicious, your only option is paternity court.
To say someone is not the father of a child, now that's a little below the belt.
That's not just hurting somebody's feelings,
Yeah.
it's ruining somebody's life.
And I want you to tell her what that feels like so she can understand. What does that feel like when she says that to you, Mr. Benning?
That little girl right there is my mother come back to be with me.
And
When
she
you
looks
tell me
just
that,
like your
when you
mother.
tell me
She's
she's
perfect.
not mine, it feels like you're taking my mother away from me again.
Watching the muskiness across the podium was hard to whitewash, and even the judge was getting frustrated by the defendant acting cold to the guy doped in his marriage. Nonetheless, we know that judge never lets things go down that easily.
Texting me, telling me I'm not the father. I even received a text telling me after he was born, which I still went through the whole labor, everything. The text telling me, oh, I want a paternity test for Jermaine too. Like, why would you say that?
And that was submitted to the court.
Yes, it was, sir.
Further text message proof was shown in the courtroom, showing what level the defendant had stooped to, which called for the judge to give a reality check to the self-obsessed mother.
Did you send it for good reason or were you just being vindictive and mean?
Trying to hurt your feelings? We had gotten into an argument. He said may or may not been true.
No,
I
they're
said,
not arguments. These are not arguments that these texts come from. These are, Jermaine, can you come over and hang out? I don't want to. Well, fine, they're not your kids anyway.
Either way, both sides and the judge were hoping the plaintiff was the father, as if not, it'll damage the kids for their whole life. Let's see if fate will have mercy on them or not.
Mr. Benning, you are not the father.
Mr. Brown was recently informed that he's been living a lie, that 18-month-old Colby is his son. Even though he had full custody, he's afraid that this revelation will separate him from his son. And his assumptions are right, because Miss Stewart wants her and Mr. Brown gone for good.
Miss Stewart, you admit you kept the secret from Mr. Brown, but claim the truth is the truth. And the fact is, you were secretly cheating on him, and you appear in court today to prove that the other man is the father.
Yes, Your Honor.
So when the judge asked the plaintiff what was at stake for him, Mr. Brown told the court he could risk losing the kid, as his whole family took him in as their family. And if his mother takes him away, it'll ruin his life. And he can provide for the kid more efficiently than the mother.
Brown, tell us what's at stake for you today.
My whole entire family knows him as theirs. I have 2 grandmas that have Alzheimer's that know him as their grandsons. My 14-year-old son knows him as his little brother. My house is a more stable home for him, a place where he's taken care of.
However, when the judge asked the alleged daddy how he found out about him not being the father, Mr. Brown told the court that after separating from him, Mommy left the kid at his place trying to move out. But instead of coming to pick Colby up herself, Miss Stewart called the cops on him.
Why didn't you come that day with the cops?
So what happened when she brought the police to your house?
By that time, I'd already talked to 1 district attorney and 3 police officers who told me the same thing that I already knew, that by law, I did not have to give him back due to the fact I signed the paternity affidavit. I was on the birth certificate.
So the guy was even on the birth certificate. I mean, why wouldn't he be playing the daddy part this long? But Miss Stewart was not ready to do it that easily. She was in paternity court to take the child with her for once and for all.
The affidavit, I was on the birth certificate. The cop that she brought was probably the only one on the force she could get to side with her.
Baby mama was so addicted to the court that she knew long enough that the plaintiff was not the father and kept putting off the truth so she could be with him. But since they were separated, there was no more reason to hide anything.
Why did you wait so long to tell him? Like, why not tell him before so he would have never had the child in the first place?
Because at that time, I went to another friend to comfort me. Because at this time, Mr. Brown and I had decided to take a break. So I went in that time and talked to a friend like I always do.
This was a paternity mess. Still, the judge was hung on the part that if Miss was really sure about the other guy being the father, or if she was doing this all out of spite. Because they get that a lot in this reality court, huh? And this is how the defendant responded to the question.
Because I was happy, I was in love with him. The fact that my son was going to be raised up in a good environment and good home. Thinking that I had a good man on my hand.
What changed?
What changed was when he decided to take my son from me.
After that revelation, the judge moved to Mr. Brown to ask how he took the revelation, as I'm sure he would have never seen this coming. And the plaintiff testified the same. In Mr. Brown's exact words, he was dumbfounded. I mean, who wouldn't be?
I've lost a lot of sleep. I've shed a lot of tears over this whole situation. I'm the only thing about that my boy's got.
Did you say, I want a DNA test? Did you think to get a DNA test?
Yes, Your Honor. I called DHS and talked to them, and they informed me that I needed to call Child Support Recovery, because that's who does the DNA test in the state that we live in.
But wait, this is the part where things get tricky. Though the ex-wife was claiming he was not the father, she had already filed child support on this guy, even before he could get a DNA test. Talk about being unfair.
When I went down and filled out the paperwork, once they started running it, they informed me that I couldn't do the DNA test because Miss Stewart had already filed child support on me.
Wait, now, you're saying he's not the child's biological father and you know that for certain,
Yes.
And yet you filed to try to get him to pay child support?
I don't know, Your Honor. I'm not even quite sure. I don't understand that.
Following this, the judge called a witness from the plaintiff's side, who told the court about what excellent and alleged days were doing with raising the child. And if it wasn't for Mommy, he could live a comfortable life.
I am both emotionally and financially involved in this whole situation. I love this man with all my heart. I know that he loves Colby with all his heart. He takes very good care of him. He's the best father in the world to that little boy, and I know this is going to devastate him completely if that's not his son. And I know the other gentleman that is supposedly the father. I've known him for a couple years, actually, and I've actually talked to him.
So the other guy was a no-show. Colby's only chance at fatherhood was the guy at the podium. If he steps down, Mommy will have no one to turn to. Nonetheless, only the result can determine how things will go down.
Mr. Brown, you are not the father.
I told you.
After suffering from years of lies from your mother and uncertainty about who your father is, Miss Lindsay's in court with the candidate, whom everyone in town claims to be her father. But both her mother and potential father are testifying otherwise.
You say that after of lies from your mother and uncertainty about who your father is, you believe you finally found him.
Yes, Your Honor.
Everyone in town, including his family, knows Mr. Dannenbrink is your father, and you intend to prove that today. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
The alleged daddy stated unequivocally that he had nothing to do with the child, because their dynamic was more like hit and quit sort of. And he was never informed about having a daughter. But the judge was concerned about the rumors in the whole town.
About 35 years ago, my mom does admit to having a child with Mr. Dannenbrink.
How many years ago?
About 35, around there.
Okay.
And when I was about 16 years old, Mr. Dannenbrink came to my house and accused me of being the child.
The plaintiff further told the court that when she was 16 years old, an ex of Mr. Dannenbrink came to the place and revealed that she was her man's daughter. And at first, it was hard for the plaintiff to imagine. So she responded to the situation like this.
I came to my mother and I talked to her about it, and she told me no, that he was not my father, that another man that she had told me was my dad was my dad.
She said this other man is your father, but you'd never met that man.
No.
After confirming with his mother, the plaintiff gave up the idea of the defendant being her father. But when they both got cozy again, Miss Lindsay's hope of Mr. Dannenbrink being the father rekindled. Still, she didn't dare to address the dilemma.
We lived right next door to each other, and we started having barbecues together and spent a few holidays together and things like that.
The man next door, your neighbor.
Yes.
You believe he's your biological father.
Yes.
But you've never said anything to him.
When the judge asked Mommy about it, she blamed it on the 70s, as people were hooking up back then for no reason. And as for them, they were both involved in other people and had just recently come close to each other, but still their relationship was platonic. Upon hearing that, the judge moved to the defendant to take his take on the situation.
I did not, Your Honor. She never told me that she was pregnant. She never told me I even had a child.
You didn't
Your
tell
Honor,
him you were
Your Honor,
pregnant?
I had no reason to tell him because he's not the father.
So you were confident of that?
Yes, I am 100%.
But were you sleeping with Mr. Dannenbrink during the window of conception?
Not as far as I know.
Up next, the defendant handed her own mother's conception calendar to the court. A little odd to watch. Still, you gotta do what you gotta do. So the calendar showed she was a full-term baby, but her mother claimed otherwise, while the defendant had no recollection of it.
This calendar shows, for one, the day that I was born. And if you count back, if I was born full term, the conception would be between May and June. The doctors did say that I was born a month premature, which puts my due date at March 11th, which my mother would be right at that time. I had no health problems when I was born. I was born at a normal weight.
The bump and go had taken a toll on the plaintiff's lives. She had a clue about her paternity, and her mother was no help at all. She told the court that she couldn't go on like this. Her only option was that DNA holding envelope. So, let's get to that.
It has been determined by this court, Mr. Dannenbrink, you are not her father.
Just 1 month ago, Mr. Peterson's wife revealed that his 22-year-old daughter, LaJoya Jackson, may not be his biological daughter, which has since ruined his life. But Mrs. Peterson, though she admits cheating, still believes that her husband is the father.
Mr. Peterson, just 1 month ago, your world came crumbling down when your wife, Mrs. Peterson, revealed she had been keeping a secret, that your 22-year-old daughter, LaJoya Jackson, may not be your biological daughter. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Why not? They've been married for such a long time. Who could manage to keep such a long secret? But in Miss Peterson's defense, she didn't want to harm her family or break what they'd built, whereas the plaintiff claimed that he had no idea about his wife being involved with any other man.
I thought she was a virgin. I asked her about past relationships. She told me that they were not sexually active, but she did have other boyfriends before me.
And that's why you had no question.
Right.
But in fact, you were not a virgin when you met him, Miss Peterson?
No, I wasn't, Your Honor.
Up next, the judge asked the daughter how she first heard this news. Apparently, she had a suspicion for almost a year now, because a guy just randomly came up to her door and told her that he was her father. But when she asked her mother, Mrs. Peterson totally denied it. Nonetheless, doubts don't go away that easily now, do they?
Which is the conversation that my father, Mr. Peterson, walked in on. She had never admitted that there was a possibility of one guy being my father, potentially being my father. And then I found out there were multiple guys that could possibly be my father.
Wow, what a brutal way to find such a thing, isn't it? They'd gotten to the point from daily arguing to not speaking at all, and Mrs. Peterson sleeping in the car in the driveway. And the woman at the altar blamed herself for it. However, this testimony made the father go like this.
This hurts.
A lot.
I can see.
A lot. I try very hard to stay around and be there, especially for the grandkids, because my grandparents were there for me, and I want to be that same type of example to them. And they call me grandpa, and every time I see them, I love you, and run up to me and give me a hug, and that touches me.
Clearly missed. Peterson's fear of losing her family had ruined her family, and now they all lacked trust in her word. So, we know when things get this messy, the only solution is a DNA result.
It has been determined by this court. You are not her father.
Oh my God.